Hello there, and welcome to Gunner Shot once again. Today we're going to look at the decoupling blues between China and the rest of the world. I picked this cartoon up where uh, India, Japan, and US are running away from China. They're symbolic of the rest of the world also running away from China. And China's saying, Xi Jinping saying, "Ye kya ho raha hai? Ye kya ho raha hai?" That's the thing we're going to look at it and this edition of A Peek into Everyday China. Okay, uh, I got some great feedback from all of you on the show. Uh, Most of you want me to continue with the show, which I will. Uh, and specifically, if only somehow one feedback suggests that if only somehow the young adults of India could watch this series, it would work wonders for us in the long run. I agree completely. And that's my aim. I want our youth to know the reality of China. And, if I take everyone's mind back, it was Mr. George Fernandez when I was a young officer. He said, China is our number one enemy. Everyone castigated him then. But I think he was right. And we should know our adversary or enemy or competitor, whatever you call it. And we don't know enough. And that is why I started this series. And for no other reason. I could have continued with any other channel, Jaipur Dialogues, Dev Talks, P Gurus, the works. But I thought, let me communicate directly and put across those issues about China which matter to all of us as I've researched them. Then, of course, another comment said, what I really appreciate about your commentary is that you are able to provide the highlights of an issue without getting tied too far down in the extra details that many other experts like to share. And the noodle reference was pretty funny. It was, yeah, I agree with you. But let me put it across this manner. I intend to give you a bird's eye view about China. Take a subject, disaggregate it from the rest of the news over a period of time, aggregate that subject together, give you a bird's eye view without too many figures. Figures are always confusing. Give you the larger picture so that it is there in your mind. And that's when you understand things. And then I leave it to you to go ahead and study as much as you want on a particular subject and delve into it. I wouldn't like to tie you down in detail because I don't myself get tied down in detail. Right? We go into the detail as required. Okay. Now let's start looking at this business of decoupling. Is decoupling really happening? That's the first question which everyone asks. A lot of talk, but does it happen? Yeah, look at it. In December, China's exports recorded the biggest year on year slump since the Wuhan lockdown in early 2020. It fell 9.9%. It was also represented the third consecutive month of decline regularly. Okay. Analysts expect further contractions in the coming months. Last month, this came out. So things are not rosy, right? And China is an export driven economy. It's not a consumer driven economy. If anything, there are problems. If the exports fall, it we'll see how the current backward integration to uh, the consumers are. So this is the backdrop under which we're going to discuss decoupling. Decoupling really started with the trade war which Trump started when he was the president. This is much before the corona came in, right? The moment the corona set in, this was in 2020, the first signs of decoupling started coming out. And this was the article which had come out then, which said China's role in global supply chains will change, but probably not overnight. It was well on the cards. right? That people are not going to just rely on one source. They wanted multi sourcing and diversification. That was the first lesson of the coronavirus and the pandemic. People did not want to be hostage to China anymore. In fact, at that time, I had written that look, decoupling is an inevitability. People laughed at me, but then it's happened. It's happening. And I predicted that it's a 5 year horizon over which decoupling will take place. And I felt that if China's export goes down by about 25%, China will become a normal nation. The belligerence of China will, reduce. Let's see where it goes. And we are just about 2.5 years down the line. And will I be proven right after 2.5 years? I think I will. It might be even before that. Okay, the real, till last year, the talk was not decoupling. The talk was diversification. Somewhere in the middle of last year, US came out with a policy of decoupling, right? When US came to know that China was, you know, into a lot of IPR theft, and it was trying to overtake uh, USA and displace the USA, and USA has opened its fangs up. So what did the USA come out with? Okay, they said US allies must not allow China to dominate raw materials, technologies, and thwart unfair trade practices. So the West as a whole have got together and rallied around USA. You also have to factor in that the Ukraine war has bonded the West as no other event. And the West, especially Europe, was feeling the poaching which China was doing. Right? So this policy comment is a major shift towards decoupling. Right? And when this shift was announced, or rather it's taking place, US is very conscious that it is going to find alternatives. And there's only one alternative in scale and size to China, and that's India. Right. What has India done to decouple? And India has played a very significant part in decoupling. Is India's latest crackdown on Chinese firms part of plan to decouple from Beijing? When was this article come out? It came out somewhere around last quarter of December, last quarter of 22. Now, why is this important? It was India which banned all the Chinese apps. India banned TikTok. India put restrictions on Chinese firms taking part in, contracts in India when the Eastern Ladakh thing happened. Last year, India cracked down on Chinese firms which were doing malpractices in accounting and threw them out. Right? Such stringent action has not been taken by any country. People in USA have said that look, you need to follow India's example. It is India alone which has had the gumption and the guts to ban TikTok completely. It is now that people have started banning TikTok selectively. Right? Some states in US have banned. Governments in Europe and in USA are banning TikTok for government use, not for public use. So there is still, well, there's a debate there. Here we are very clear. So actually, in from many points of view, we are the leaders in this decoupling drive. And then the West and Australia and Japan and South Korea have started contributing. Right? Let's be very clear. We're not going to get away from the huge manufacturing base which China has put up. But in key sectors, there is going to be complete decoupling, and slowly people are going to be less dependent on China. Right. Now, what does this story say? China's economic recovery clouded by coronavirus, US decoupling threat, and a sluggish output of, export outlook. So all three are, it's a triple whammy. The dislocations due to the corona over the past zero COVID have played merry hell into the Chinese economy. And they're not going to recover fast. That's been reinforced by the decoupling threat and exports. Exports have been hit not only because of the decoupling threat, but due to other factors. That includes the Ukraine war and reshoring and friendshoring. So it's a multiple thing which is hitting China. Okay, now the German chancellor went to China and he spoke of diversification and not decoupling. But that's semantics. Why? Most of Europe and especially Germany are heavily stuck with China. They've invested heavily there. They depended on the Chinese market, and the Chinese were squeezing them. In fact, the Europeans are caught in a vice trap with China. They can't decouple, they want to decouple. So they're talking of diversification. Right? They have to slowly decouple. Call it what you want. They want to get away from China. And with China supporting Russia almost uh, blatantly over Ukraine, most of the Europeans are now anti China. And that is why NATO and many people in the EU have said that China is a systemic challenge to them. Right? So Europe is caught on the horns of a dilemma. China is a systemic challenge, but it is heavily invested. How does it extricate itself is the question. But the intent is clear. Okay, Apple. Now I'll take you through 2-3 slides on Apple, on 2-3 reports which have built over a period of time. Why I have chosen Apple? I could have chosen Dell, I could have chosen others also. I've chosen Apple for the simple reason that it is the spearhead of decoupling from China, and it is one of the big tech firms which is actually decoupling unambiguously, right? For some reason, Apple is just not budging, and it is not bothered about China. Okay, let's have a look at it a little closer. This started when? December 22. Apple supplier Foxconn to invest $500 million in India in supply chain diversification from China. Already, Apple had started, producing iPhones from India in their Chennai plant. Okay, when the operations in Guangdong in China in the Foxconn plant were severely interrupted last year due to COVID, and there were protests and all that, and workers started running away from that plant for whatever reason, right? I think Apple took a call that they have to get out of China or hedge their bets away from China. So they've now said that we're going to look at India. They've been coming to India for the past 1 year plus. They've approached the skill development board to give them the trained people who they can use in their factories. After all, it has to be a slow transition or a seamless transition. They've upped their capacities in Chennai. They're also establishing another factory, I think, in Maharashtra somewhere. And they're on their way. Now, what do they feel? India's share of global iPhone production forecast to match China's by 2027, right? As Apple steps up supply chain diversification. More important, India is predicted to account for up to 50% of total iPhone production capacity by 2027. Okay, earlier production was 25%, now it's 50%. So, generally, what I had spoken to you earlier, 25% by in 5 years, that's about 2025. Go take another 2 years when things stabilize 50%. If 50% of capacities and decoupling takes place from China, China is in serious problems. As I understand, as I Apple will keep only that production capacity in China, which China can buy in its market. Their supply to the rest of the world is going to be out of China. Now that's very serious. There's no export then. Complete export from China will stop. It's only domestic market which will be catered for. This picture which accompanied that one shows Indian workers of the plant at Chennai. Okay. Now, Apple suppliers in China hit by fresh talk of orders cuts and further decoupling between world's two largest economies. And this is going to the third biggest democracy, or rather the biggest democracy on earth, the big power, India. So they are laying off their suppliers. As it is, they had problems when the Guangdong factory was shut up, and due to COVID, etc., etc. So now they are hedging their bets very clearly, right? But will China give up? No. China's Henan goes on offensive charm to assure Foxconn chairman of comprehensive services for world's largest iPhone factory. They're wooing. If you see the articles, they have said, look, don't go to India. India doesn't have infrastructure, the bureaucracy is weak, their manufacturing ethos is poor, their transport is poor, bribery, this, that, it's that Indian rope trick being shown to them. But Apple is clear. The clarity is so high that Foxconn is shifting to India along with Chinese firms, which are its suppliers there. And they're going to supply here, they're going to set up their units here. And I'm sure over a period of time, slowly they'll get Indian suppliers up to standard, and those Chinese people will go. This is a shift which is happening. It's a harbinger of things to come. You have to look at it in the wider thing. You think Apple is the only one? No. Dell has also started the story. Let's look at it closer. US computer giant Dell to replace all China made chips in its products by 2024. When did this come? Jan 23. Okay. Dell wants all the chips used in its products, including those made by foreign suppliers in China. Foreign suppliers making it in China to be sourced from outside the country. They want to quit. Dell reportedly also want plans to move 50% of its production out of China by 2025. Big. And that's not all. Dell plans to reduce China. This is a little later. They're looking at accelerated decoupling and supply chain diversification. 50%. Now this gets reported in Nikkei Asia and Taiwan also. Right? Analysts say this is important. Analysts say more big tech brands are evaluating their exposure to China production and increasing geopolitical headwinds. One thing the American industry and Silicon Valley is very clear. They are not going to let go. It's far too seasoned for them to allow China to continue with its theft. They want to get out of China for this one reason. And the it's no more business as usual. Hereafter, it's going to be business as unusual. Right. This article says China's loss is Southeast Asia's gain as supply chains shift away to cheaper climates. Why? Why? I mean, what is the significance of this? The labor market in China is becoming costlier. So the profit margins are getting squeezed. So this is the next point for decoupling. If you're aging, your workforce is reducing, people are not getting born, your cost of production is going up. And if there's another alternative where the cost of production and productivity is better, why will business not move? So this is yet another factor for decoupling which is happening. And that's being reported by South China Morning Post, not me. Look, all this is not inference. I'm inferring whatever is there from facts as they have reported. Right? This is not a wild guess or analysis. The analysis is what happens after this. What does this say? Global Chinese firm tried decoupling from China as US business climate turns hostile. So this is very funny. Chinese companies want to dissociate themselves from the made in China tag. That's what this picture shows. They don't want to tell anyone that we are from China. So they're going to go and park themselves from somewhere and from there go back to US or wherever in the West and sell. Because it's only the rich economies who have to depend on China. So there's a problem. Part of decoupling. I'm showing you various hues and shapes of decoupling which is happening. I found this very interesting. The Chinese don't want to be Chinese. Right? China's world factory moniker and whether India or others could steal it remains topic of discourse. Yeah, naturally, they're going to be disparaging comments in media. They will say India doesn't have the ability to replicate China or replace China. They'll talk of poor infrastructure, industrial shortcomings, relatively weak literacy, skill sets, all this. They're going to talk. They're going to be very harsh and expose us everywhere. Right? But that's to be expected. They're going to going to paint us black in one sense, and they're going to go hard at this, all these brands not to leave China. China will bend backwards. Look, the Chinese communists are very clear. When it comes to survival, they'll fall at your feet and lick your feet. And once you're entrapped in their thing, they'll screw you. They'll turn all screws. And that's what's happened over the past 20 years. Okay. Taiwan also has told startups to shun mainland China and go to Japan instead of amid supply chain decoupling. The same story with Japan, the same story with South Korea. There is an international consciousness that we have to move away from China. That is the thing. Like I said, it will not be apparent today, but down the line, it has to happen. And our challenge is to assess what China's reaction will be to all this. Because there's a danger in this. If you're going to eat China's cake, China will come with you with hammer and tongs. There's a security aspect to this. And that's what I've been telling everyone. This article says China, okay, this China's loss is Southeast Asia's gain as supply chain shift to a little cheaper claims. We saw it earlier, it's a repetition, sorry. This is just about 3-4 days old. Okay. China shipping containers pile up at overcrowded ports as overseas order dwindle. What does the container yard manager say on this? He says there is no business. That's what in the bottom right corner. There's no business. Queues of trucks outside major container terminals, empty containers, and container prices and prices on major Asian ports have fallen, and they don't expect a rebound for a few months more. This is 20th February, 4 days back. Again, this is from Shenzhen. This is reporting from Shenzhen. That lady is reporting from Shenzhen. You see, people ask me why South China Morning Post. I could do my analysis from anything. I could give my own analysis. But I'm trying to get you from the horse's mouth, or the donkey's mouth, or the dragon's mouth, call it what you want. What they feel. You go to China Daily, you go to Global Times, you go to Xinhua, you will get a completely different picture. For some reason, and that's because of Hong Kong exists under certain laws, and South China Morning Post is based in Hong Kong. It has got certain roots, though it is owned by Jack Ma, and many reporting is from mainland China. They still come out with these. They're probably telling their own people that these are the problems. In a day, you will get about 3 or 4 such articles if you search. And over a period of time, the picture comes out. You have to piece things together. Okay, this is very, very interesting. The Freightos Baltic Index shows that the rate for shipping a 40-foot container from Asia to the west coast of United States, that's Los Angeles and San Francisco, was US 1295 in the past week. It was 92% lower than the same time last year. Last year it was something like 12,000, 13,000 per container. Containers are there for taking. No one wants them. They've just gone down. Meanwhile, the rate from Asia to the east coast of the US has dropped by 86% year on year. And the rate for shipping from Asia to Northern Europe has fallen by 80%. This is part of this article, right? So you can imagine there are no exports. We also saw earlier exports were down. If exports are down, your production is down. If production is down, your factories could flop. Your profits will go down. If both these happen, there are a lot of factories which have closed down in China. If that has happened, there's unemployment. Or people are working at lower wages. If that happens, if people don't have money or they're unemployed or the wages are low, there's no consumerism. And to offset that, Beijing has pumped in, injected money. And that's what I said in the last one about the big worry of China. I also said that this cash injection might not work because people who don't have a job, if I don't have a job and I don't have a hope in hell for the next 6 months that I'll get a job, I'll take the money, keep it, and survive. You do backward integration, China is in a bad shape. Look at this, markets in China are hell. Chinese brands are adapting to survive and they're fighting with each other. Okay. Chinese firms from tech startups to fashion manufacturers are forced to shake up their strategies as local pressures mount. For brands skipping the China market to focus on US and European customers, one big hurdle remains: the perception that their goods are cheap, shoddy, or fake. The eternal Chinese trademark, fake. So, yeah, I mean, just think, okay, what's the forecast for 2023? Very weak outlook, analysts say. The second year, the second year could bring a pickup, but the global demand is going down. Inflation is high. Ukraine war is continuing. The rich countries who can buy are not buying. If that continues, recovery, doubtful. Another facet: unemployed workers are battling for offers. They're prepared to work at lower rates. They're praying for stability. They're not, there's a problem. And this is something which I had highlighted earlier also. This is a picture of a job fair in some place. Okay. Oh, this is not from South China Morning Post. This is from Nikkei Asia. This U.S. states curb. In the sense, U.S. states eye curbs on Chinese land purchases as tensions rise. Now, what's happening? There are a lot of places where rich Chinese are leaving China and are migrating away. It's a run culture. They're going to Malaysia, they're going to Singapore. I spoke of this earlier. And they're going to US in a big way. And they're trying to set up factories there. In one particular place in USA, I don't remember which, oh, that local county and that local district or whatever they call it had given permission for a Chinese factory to be set up. But today it's a problem there. They're not able to set up. And US has started putting curbs on Chinese people trying to acquire land or set up factories and all that. This gets reported in Nikkei Asia, right? And yeah, citing security risks, this is from South China Morning Post. US states move to bar Chinese land purchases and projects with China ties. So both from Japan and from China, you get the same reporting. So it's something happening seriously. They don't want these fellows to go and start buying all over. I'm sure the same thing is happening in Europe also. You combine this story with what's happening in Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Myanmar, Nepal, and India, and this belt, and then see the overall picture. Where is China's and the problems they're having with their Belt and Road? Where is China's manufacturing? Where is their economic output? And how is their economy going to come up? And after this, if someone tells me that the Chinese GDP is going to go by 10, double digit or high single digit, I'll look at him as like a madman or a Sinophile. Nothing what I've said is my own imagination. This is all reported Chinese sources. Okay, very recently, this again a report from Nikkei Asia says Chinese reopening rally stalls as foreign investors cut purchases. Recovery hopes wane after property sales, cargo shipments prove disappointing. So we spoke of property sometime back, the great property slump. There's no revival. I'll touch upon it down the line. Cargo shipments, I've just given you the figures. This gets reported in South China Morning Post and Nikkei Asia simultaneously. So there has to be some truth. So this is the China which is getting decoupled by the day. Okay. Again, this is from Nikkei Asia. US sanctions derail China chipmakers' expansion plans. This again I spoke some time back, where ASML has and the Dutch and the European guys and Intel and everyone have been collared by USA not to give any technology to China on semiconductor manufacture. So China is not going to get the latest semiconductors and it does not have the technology to make them. Look, many people talk of many technologies which China has. There are two, three technologies which China doesn't have. One is engine technology. That's why their fighters are useless. The second is semiconductor technology. And the third is seed technology. You'll be surprised. They don't have technology for seeds. Mr. Xi Jinping, every second, third month, I've been seeing this now for the past 4, 5 years, goes wherever he goes, he says, I want a breakthrough in seed technology. Because if they don't have seed technology, they remain food insecure. That is something for all of us to think. And I've written about this in many places. Right? Right. This is what I've had to say about decoupling. Right? In the next episode, I'm going to take a slightly different thing, come closer home. I'm not going to talk of India, but I'm going to talk of Chinese activities in our neighboring states and how things are moving. With this, thank you and Jai Hind.